My girlfriend said, "You're too innocent, you never noticed," after revealing her infidelity. But I already knew. I was just preparing a surprise for her. Before we go on, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling us which city you're tuning in from. I was always seen as the good guy, the innocent, the gullible one, but what I did with Katia showed I was just playing innocent. I'm 27, and for some years now, I've been running a restaurant I inherited from my father. It wasn't something improvised or a responsibility that suddenly fell on me without preparation. From a young age, I was interested in business, understanding how people worked, how they made decisions, and what motivated them. My father knew this, and that's why, before leaving me the restaurant, he taught me everything he could, from administration to something more important he never said directly, but that I understood over time. Observe. Observing people is what truly sustains a business. You can have good food, good service, but if you don't know how to read people, you're lost. Perhaps that's why what happened with Katia didn't take me completely by surprise. But I won't get ahead of myself. Katia and I had been together for 11 months when everything happened. I met her at the restaurant. She wasn't a regular customer, but she started coming quite frequently for a couple of weeks. She always ordered the same thing, always sat at a table near the window, and always seemed to be alone, though constantly looking at her phone. The first time we spoke was because she complained about a minor detail in her order. Nothing serious, something any customer could let slide, but she did it with a strange mix of annoyance and charm. She didn't raise her voice, she wasn't rude, but she managed to get me to attend to her personally. That was my first mistake, assuming that kind of behavior was casual. After that, she started greeting me every time she came in. Little by little, our conversations grew longer. She told me about her work, her family, her friends. She told me she valued sincerity, loyalty, and that she was tired of fake people. She was convincing, very convincing. In time, we started dating. The first few months were calm. Katia was attentive, affectionate, present. There were no big conflicts or awkward scenes. It seemed like a stable, even easy relationship. And in retrospect, that also should have caught my attention because real relationships aren't usually so perfect at the beginning without a reason. The change was gradual, almost imperceptible if you weren't paying attention. But I was. It started with small comments. Comments that, if taken in isolation, meant nothing, but together formed a pattern. She spoke ill of her friends, not directly at first, but like someone dropping an unimportant opinion. She always exaggerates everything. I wish she were more discreet. I don't trust her much, but it is what it is. At first I thought it was normal. Everyone, at some point, complains about someone close, but then she started doing it more frequently and with more intensity. Then came the comments about her family. She said they didn't understand her, that they criticized her, that they were hypocrites, that in front of others they pretended to be united, but in private everything was different. The curious thing was that when I coincided with them, Katia behaved exactly like the perfect daughter, attentive, affectionate, understanding. It was a complete transformation. I remember one dinner in particular. We were with her parents and sister. Katia not only actively participated in the conversation, but even defended her family on certain topics. She smiled, nodded, joked. It was natural, or at least it seemed so. That same night, when we left, she changed completely. She complained about everything that had happened at dinner. She said her mother was controlling, her father faked interest, her sister was unbearable. It wasn't just criticism, it was contempt. That's when I had the first uncomfortable thought. If she does that to everyone, what guarantees me that she doesn't do the same to me when I'm not present? I didn't say anything at that moment. I didn't confront her. I had no proof of anything, just a feeling. And feelings, without evidence, aren't much use. But I did do something. I started to really observe her. Before, I trusted what she said. Now I started to notice what she did. And that's where more details began to appear. The calls weren't constant, but they were strategic. Sometimes, when we were together, her phone would ring and she'd look at it quickly, as if evaluating something before deciding not to answer. Other times she would answer, but she'd step away a bit, lowering her voice. When she came back, she always had an explanation ready. It was work, a friend who needs help. Nothing important. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. too fast, too prepared. Then there were the outings. Katia started having more last-minute commitments, plans that appeared out of nowhere, meetings with friends she couldn't postpone, family events she'd never talked about before. Again, nothing that was suspicious on its own, but the pattern kept growing. Her schedules also changed. There were days when she took longer to respond to messages, others when she disappeared for hours and then returned as if nothing had happened. When I asked her, she always had a logical explanation. Always. And that's what started to bother me. Not that she had explanations, but that there was never any doubt, any void, any contradiction. Everything fit too well, as if it were rehearsed. One night, while we were having dinner in my apartment, I noticed something else. She left her phone on the table while she went to the bathroom. The screen lit up with a notification. I didn't see the full content, just a part of the message, but it was enough. It didn't say her name, it didn't say anything explicit, but the tone wasn't that of a casual conversation. I didn't touch the phone, I didn't check it, I didn't do anything at that moment, but that was the first time I seriously considered the possibility that Katia wasn't who she claimed to be. And that's where many people make a mistake. They confront too soon. They ask without having answers. They accuse without proof. I didn't do that because if there was one thing I had learned in business, it's that information is worth more than reaction. So I decided to do something different. I started investigating. Not in an obsessive or impulsive way. I didn't secretly check her phone or follow her down the street like in a movie. It wasn't that. It was something simpler and more effective. I started creating situations, small changes in the routine. I'd tell her I'd be busy on certain days when I wasn't. I'd cancel last-minute plans to see how she reacted. I varied my schedule without warning, and above all, I stopped being always available. I wanted to see what she did when she didn't have total control over my time. The first reaction was subtle. She seemed confused. She asked me more than usual where I was, who I was with, why I wasn't responding as quickly as before. It wasn't an exaggerated reaction, but it was different enough to notice. Then came something more interesting. She started to adapt. If before she was the one who canceled, now she seemed to do it in response to my changes. If I said I couldn't see her, coincidentally, she also had something to do. It was as if we were playing a silent game where both pretended normalcy, but the difference was clear. She didn't know I was playing. I didn't know she wasn't. As the weeks passed, the pieces began to fit. The calls at specific times. The outings coincided with certain days, and most importantly, her excuses began to repeat themselves. They weren't exactly the same words, but they were the same structure. That's what confirmed my suspicions. Katia didn't improvise. Katia planned. And when someone plans so much, it's because they have something to hide. That's when I made a decision. If I was going to uncover the truth, I couldn't do it halfway. Suspicions and hints weren't enough. I needed proof. I needed to be completely sure of what was happening, because if there was one thing was clear about, it's that when everything came to light, it wasn't going to be a calm conversation, and for that I had to prepare myself. So I stopped acting like her trusting boyfriend and started acting like someone who understands exactly who they're dealing with, but without her knowing it. And that's when everything started to get interesting. A seemingly normal day ended up being the breaking point. Katia told me she was going to a friend's house that afternoon. It wasn't suspicious in itself. She had done it before. In fact, that kind of plan was part of her routine. Notify naturally, give a name, act as if everything was perfectly clear. But this time there was a detail, a small, almost insignificant detail, if you weren't paying attention. Hours earlier, I had been at the mall closing a deal with a supplier. Nothing out of the ordinary. I was walking through the aisles checking some pending tasks when, by pure coincidence, I saw her. It was a friend Katia had mentioned. I recognized her immediately because I had already seen her a couple of times with her. She was leaving a sports store, an Adidas store, with a bag in her hand. She was alone, calm, unhurried. I greeted her. It was a brief, casual interaction. I asked her how she was. We talked for a moment, and then she, completely naturally, asked me about Katia. That's where everything clicked. She didn't say, "See you later," or "I'm going with her." She didn't make any reference to seeing each other that day. For her, Katia simply wasn't on her radar at that moment. I didn't say anything. I just replied normally and went on my way. But in my head, there was no longer any doubt. If Katia wasn't with her friend, then where was she? I didn't call her, I didn't confront her, I didn't ask her anything. I did something simpler. I went to her apartment. It wasn't the first time I'd been there, so I knew the place well, the access points, the times when there was usually movement. When I arrived, the first thing I did was observe, and there was her car parked right where she always left it. That alone already confirmed something. She hadn't gone out with any friend. But there was another car, a white Honda Civic. It wasn't hers. It wasn't any close relative I knew. It wasn't a car I had seen there before. I approached carefully. I wasn't doing anything illegal, but I also didn't want to draw attention. I walked along the side of the building where I knew there was a window that faced the living room, and I looked. There was Katia hugging another man. There was closeness, trust, familiarity, too much. For a moment, I felt the anger rising, that primary impulse to go in, to complain, to make noise, to end everything right there. But I didn't because I'm not that kind of person. I don't improvise when I'm upset, and, above all, I don't react when someone else thinks they're in control. I breathed. I stayed a few more seconds, enough to confirm what was already obvious, and then I left without making a sound, without anyone knowing I had been there. That night, I didn't write anything out of the ordinary. I didn't change my way of speaking. There were no indirect complaints, no sarcasm, no signs that I knew anything. The next day, I acted as always. I invited her to my house. She accepted without a problem. Katia arrived as if nothing had happened, smiling, relaxed, even more affectionate than usual. That kind of behavior that many people interpret as affection, but when you've already seen what's behind it, it feels different. More calculated. That night, while we were having dinner, I did something I had been preparing for a long time. I took advantage of one of her clearest habits, speaking ill of others. I didn't need to force the conversation. I just had to direct it. I asked her about her family, then about her friends, then about some specific people, and she did what she always did. Talk, criticize, describe each person in a completely different way than she showed in front of them. I didn't interrupt, I didn't judge, I just listened and recorded. My phone was on the table in a normal position, as if I had simply left it there. The recorder was active. I didn't need anything more. That night wasn't about confronting her, it was about gathering, letting her build what would later become something bigger. After listening to her for long enough, I knew I had everything I needed to do something about it, and I decided on the exact moment. Her birthday. Katia had always talked about how important that date was to her. She liked to be the center of attention, receive gifts, have everyone around. It was her day, and I was going to make sure it was, but not in the way she expected. For the next few days, I didn't change anything. I even planned her party with her. Everything normal, everything under control, until the day came. The atmosphere was what she wanted. Friends, family, music, food, laughter. I made sure everything went well. No one suspected anything. No one had reason to. Katia was happy. It was time for gifts. Everyone was gathered, attentive, waiting for that typical moment where the person celebrating opens each detail while the others watch. But before that, I called her. I told her I wanted to talk to her for a moment privately. She accepted without a problem, though with a slight expression of curiosity. We moved far enough away so no one could hear. And that's where it all began. Katia, do you remember when you said you went with your friend that Friday afternoon? She nodded without thinking too much. Yes, of course. It's curious, I continued, because I just saw your friend leaving the Adidas store at the mall. I greeted her and everything. In fact, she asked me about you. There was a small change in her expression. It wasn't immediate, but it was there. Really? She replied. Maybe I gave you the wrong friend's name. I looked at her for a few seconds. Do you think I'm an idiot? Her expression changed completely. Honey, why are you saying that? You're scaring me. Katia, stop the bullshit. I went to your house that day, and you were with another guy, the one with the white Honda Civic. There was no longer any attempt to soften anything. She was silent for a second, and then her attitude changed completely. Her face became serious, cold. You're too innocent that you only just realized now. Yes, she continued. I was with him that day, and I loved it. The way she said it was direct, without guilt. You didn't have the balls to tell me that day, she added. What did you wait for? Almost 2 weeks to get brave. Not a real man. I listened to her without interrupting. And now what? She continued. Are you going to tell everyone? No one will believe you. To them, I'm the perfect friend, the perfect girl, the perfect daughter, the perfect sister. You're just going to make a fool of yourself. So you'd better accept your place. You're the provider and shut up. Besides, it suits you. The owner of a restaurant has to be with someone like me, right? There was a brief silence, and then I replied, yes, I think you're right. Her expression changed slightly, as if she didn't expect that answer. I understand you, I continued. I'm a busy person. I can't give you all the time you deserve. I understand why you did it. She smiled. That's what I like. Turn around. Now go back to the party and eat the cake. We returned. Everything was still the same for everyone else. No one noticed anything, but I already knew what I was going to do. The small Bluetooth speaker was already connected, the phone ready, everything prepared. I smiled slightly and raised my voice enough to get attention. Before you open your presents, love, I want to play an audio I recorded myself, where I show what a beautiful and perfect woman you are. Some people smiled, others made positive comments. Katia, in front of everyone, responded enthusiastically. Really? You made me a poem? Love. I looked at her. Oh no, this poem was made by you. My voice was heard first, clear, calm. Hey, Katia, how's your sister doing? About what you told me about her pregnancy. There was a second of silence, and then her natural voice relaxed without any filter. That bitch just cries all the time. She's high risk and always plays the victim. Honestly, I hope she loses the baby. I don't want her to give it to me to take care of later and have to do it out of obligation. The atmosphere changed in seconds. The smiles disappeared. Some thought it was a bad taste joke. Others simply stood still, processing. The recording continued. Hey, but isn't it a bit cruel to say that? I asked in the audio, and she replied without hesitation. Why cruel? She deserves it. She was always the good girl, the exemplary one. Her only flaw will be that she's useless as a woman. What a shame she can't even have a child. Literally, that's what a woman is for. A dry sound interrupted the recording. Someone dropped a glass. Katia's sister was no longer holding back. Her eyes were full of tears, but she still wasn't reacting physically. It was as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. But it wasn't over. The recording continued. Katia, how's your father? How's his illness progressing? Her answer was even worse. Well, I'm happy, actually. I hope that man leaves now. They say he's more serious. His era got worse. That's what happens to him for smoking all day. That's all he did in his youth. At least the old man has 2 houses. Let him leave one to me and one to my unbearable sister. Their father lowered his gaze. He said nothing, but his expression changed completely. The disappointment wasn't silent. It was visible. The recording continued. What do you think happened with my very best friend, Lucia? It turns out her new baking venture isn't working for her. God, it makes me laugh to see her make a fool of herself on TikTok when she has like 50 views. Probably all her own. It makes me laugh how she says she does it to heal her heart. If her husband hung himself, it must have been because she didn't satisfy him. Imagine how bad she must have been for the guy to decide to leave this world. At that moment, a woman took a step back. It was Lucia. Her face was completely distraught. It wasn't just anger, it was pain, deep pain. But the recording didn't stop. Honey, honestly, what do you think Dana's husband sees in her? I mean, the girl is fat, beach ball level. Doesn't it disgust him to sleep between her folds? And that's where everything exploded. Katia's sister couldn't take it anymore. She took the speaker and threw it directly at her. The blow was dry. Katia fell backwards, bringing her hand to her face. Within seconds, her eye began to swell. Chaos erupted. Several people stood up at the same time. Some tried to stop the sister who was screaming through tears. I hate you, bitch. How could you say that? Katia was crying, completely overwhelmed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say it like that. I'm sorry, but it was too late. Her father spoke. He didn't raise his voice, but his tone was enough to silence several people. I should have abandoned you when I could. The silence that followed was heavy. After everything I gave you, to speak like that about us. Lucia approached. Her face was completely serious. After I made your cake for this birthday, you say? Without hesitation, she slapped her. Don't you ever mention my husband again in your life. Katia no longer had control of the situation. She tried to speak, but no one listened to her. People began to move away from her, as if her presence was uncomfortable, as if suddenly the perfect image she had built had shattered in front of everyone. And in the midst of all that, her sister collapsed. She brought her hand to her abdomen and fell. Then everything changed. It was no longer anger, it was urgency. I ran to her along with her father. We lifted her as best we could and took her to the nearest hospital. The journey was tense. No one spoke, only her agitated breathing and the hurried instructions of the staff upon arrival. During those hours, I didn't think about Katia. I thought about what I had caused because, yes, even though she had said all that, I was the one who decided to expose it that way, and the consequences were real. When a doctor finally came out, we all stood up. She's fine, he said. It was a reaction to stress. The baby is in perfect condition. There was a collective sigh of relief. He even mentioned something unexpected. By the way, the previous high-risk diagnosis was incorrect. There are no complications. Everything is normal. Her father sat down. He seemed to be able to breathe for the first time in hours. When I was able to talk to her, I approached. I'm sorry, I told her. I didn't want this to happen. She looked at me. Her eyes were still swollen, but her expression was different. Thank you, she replied. Not for this, but for showing me who she really is. I didn't know what to say because there was no correct answer. Months passed, and curiously, I kept in touch with her family. Not in a forced way. They invited me to some gatherings. Sometimes I went, sometimes I didn't. It was strange, but also natural. I invited them to the restaurant occasionally. It was a way of maintaining a certain bond, even though there was no longer a relationship with Katia. I didn't know much more about her, only that she left the city. No one wanted to maintain contact with her. Her circle broke completely, and in the end, that's what happened. Many always saw me as the good guy, the innocent, the gullible one. But what I did wasn't impulsive. It was planned, and yes, perhaps it had consequences that I didn't fully grasp, but it also made something clear. There are people who build a perfect image until someone decides to show who they really are.